Welcome, listeners. Here's your gateway to the darkest corners of the human psyche. Immerse yourself in bone-chilling tales of terror, each story meticulously narrated to send shivers down your spine. From haunted houses to sinister creatures lurking in the shadows, every episode promises to leave you on the edge of your seat. Join us, if you dare, and let your darkest fears come to life. Subscribe now and become a part of the nightmare. Blurred reality. What am I to do? The door to the secret passageway I found earlier has vanished. I have already tried searching for the catch with one hand hidden surreptitiously behind my back, whilst pretending to drink from my water glass. The entire painted wall is now a seamless solid panel. Access that way has been cut off. Whilst brushing my hair, I use the opportunity to toss my head around, trying to appear nonchalant, but frantically scanning every corner of the room for other ideas. In the dark gloom of the night, outside the glass doors on the balcony, I sense more than visualize the somehow threatening outline of a huge giant of a man. His head is completely shaved apart from a straggly ponytail, and he is so brawny he does not seem to possess a neck. Huge arms firmly crossed across his toned chest, the sleeves of his pristine white t-shirt strained to cover bulging biceps. His features look foreign, Asian, maybe Japanese. He reminds me of some kind of intimidating sumo wrestler. He has been crouching there, squatting on his haunches silently yet with infinite patience in the shadows against the wall since sunset. In all that time, his head has not moved an inch, but I feel him observing me constantly, just waiting for me to give him the smallest chance to uncross those powerful arms and pounce upon me. Under different circumstances, I might have found that muscular chest clearly suggesting a solid six-pack of pure strength rather attractive, but not here, not now. His ominous presence is too threatening, and I am becoming increasingly scared of him. The expression on the big man's face seems menacing, despite his mean features remaining totally immobile. His monolithic eyes are glued to a fixed spot straight ahead, but I know he is aware of my every move. Any attempt to escape that way via the balcony will prove impossible for sure. The solid oak door to the corridor outside this small, square room seems to be beckoning to me. Could it possibly have been left unlocked? Might that be the way out of here? I must not show any expression of hope on my face where the big man might see. There are framed pictures on the wall, awful, amateurish forest scenes and prettily twee coastlines and weak, faded watercolors which I pretend to admire, cocking my head on one side and scrutinizing the details as I've seen people do in art exhibitions. As I examine each picture, I start gradually making my way towards the brown and black striped door, creeping ever so carefully in the direction of my longed-for freedom. Wham! The big man is suddenly only about a meter away from me. He is now standing squarely in front of the door, barring the way, still with those intimidating arms crossed across his chest. He is grinning at me, but in an eerily smug sort of way. At his full height, he looks well over 2 meters tall. He must have guessed my intention. I cannot retreat, though. I just know that would be a fatal mistake. This is it. It is now or never, my only chance. I have got to be brave. I tell myself I can do it if I really try. Words from my mom and long-gone childhood suddenly ring out from nowhere. Never be afraid of anyone. Babe, you can do anything if you really want to, you know. I must keep moving at all costs, but keep it slow and deliberate. The regular ticking of the clock, the gentle, insignificant hum of the heater, the distant drone of heavy traffic speeding by on the highway outside, all simply fade away to nothing. I somehow manage to swallow, hold in my breath, stretch out my hand and steel myself for the impact. There is a thunderous, pounding noise in my ears. My stomach is in knots. There is no impact. I cannot believe my own eyes. My hand reaches straight through him, directly to the handle, and I yank downwards. dragging it inwards with all the force I can muster. But it is not heavy at all. The flimsy door flies open, knocking me off balance, the frail barrier swinging around like cardboard. Beyond lies my freedom. The sound of his demented laughter suddenly ricochets round the room, sending shivers fluttering down my spine. It is a cackling, nasty laugh. No time to waste here. I have to flee. I hurtle away from that place without knowing or caring which way to run. I'm heading left, chased by the awful sound of his sinister sniggering. It is not a raucous belly laugh, not a guffaw either, but it is far from a friendly chuckle. It is the kind of gleeful, smirky snigger a cat might make if it could, when toying with a terrified, cornered mouse. Ahead lies a long, empty corridor with scores of identical doors lining both sides. Floor, ceiling, and walls are all painted a dazzling clinical white. It resembles a hospital. The thudding of my bare feet on the glacial ceramic tiles seems muffled, and I have the bizarre thought that the sound is being absorbed by the walls themselves. I almost miss a sudden turning to my right and belatedly grab hold of the wall, hurling myself blindly round the corner, both arms flailing as I recover my step. There is a staircase in front of me, and I hesitate. Do I go up or down? I am too slow. The big man has leapt from the floor above and landed without a sound on all fours in front of me, his head low to the ground with both of his unblinking, slanted eyes fixated on me. They are black, predatory eyes. It is an almost reptilian stare. I am unable to look away. Like a rabbit caught in a headlight, I am powerless to move. My limbs are paralyzed. As he inches forward, preparing to pounce, his nostrils quiver. He smells my fear. I shrink away and down into myself. He lunges. I shriek. The predator has his prey. His icy fingers surround my neck in a steely grip. Some deep-rooted instinct within me awakens the will to retaliate, and I begin grappling for my life. My thrashing fingers find his face, and I succeed in raking my nails across the side of his cheek. He bellows in rage, then squeezes harder. A foggy grayness hovering at the outside edges of my vision grows darker and thicker. He jerks his hands, and then there is only blackness and silence. I swim, and the world spins. An intense brightness, a kaleidoscope of colors. I struggle to open my eyes and make out the familiar outline of a photo frame by my bed. This apparition of normality calms me slightly, but I am still shaking and my head is thumping. I stagger to the bathroom to wash my clammy hands and splash my face with cold water. There, I do a double take at my reflection in the mirror. Winding all around my throat is a narrow ribbon of furious, reddish-purple bruising. Incredulous, I bring up my hand to touch my damaged skin and wince. I notice my fingers. There is blood, an unpleasantly sticky mass of bloody gunge clogged underneath the nails. I suddenly feel extremely faint. Then, just as I am about to turn on the cold water tap, I freeze in dread. An icy snake of terror slithers up my spine as I become aware of a malevolent presence. I perceive a shadow in the far corner of the bathroom. It is the big man. Here, in my bathroom. He is crouching beside our shower in much the same position as he was on the balcony earlier, and he is smirking at me. There are now 3 angry-looking score marks running from his left ear to his nose. Terror-stricken, I back out of the bathroom and run. I struggle and scrabble with the latch to open the door to the garden, only to find it is not our garden. I find myself in a thick forest of some weird kind of bamboo plant whose tips tower high above me, entwining themselves into a messy vegetal rooftop, drowning out the sunlight. I have to breathe in to squeeze between the smooth, gigantic trunks, each one easily the size of a man's thigh. It is as if I am moving in slow motion, and the big man's insane laughter continues to echo all around me. As I try to advance further, I become more and more entangled in this impenetrable green prison. My legs are now totally enmeshed in a cluster of smaller shoots. hundreds of fine tendrils entwined around my shins. I am trapped, unable to move another inch. Help me, I scream. Help me, somebody, please. I'm stuck. I jerk bolt upright, the bed sheet coiled tightly round my legs. Well, I suppose that explains me feeling trapped. I attempt to reason. But wait, why is my heart still pounding like that? I notice the door handle beginning to move, and with a sense of foreboding, I become aware of the big man's threatening presence once again. No, please, no. This can't really be happening. Please, please tell me it can't. I try to take flight, but my legs refuse to obey. Thunderous laughter erupts all around, coming closer, getting louder. The intense pressure on my eardrums is too painful. My bedroom door is opening. Here we go again. This isn't real. If you take the pill, you will see him again, the girl told me. I didn't want to take it because I knew what the consequences were. I saw what the addiction had done to my mom, but I missed him more than I could handle, and I was grasping at straws for survival. Ever since Alex was killed, I have felt like I was losing my mind. He was the only one who wanted to survive this world with me. He was the only one who wanted to actually make it without falling victim to the pill. And was I about to give that all up to see his face one more time? Yes, I was. The girl watched as I chased the little red pill with water. It went down easy, but nothing happened at first. Just wait, she whispered. The room started to spin, and I had to grab the nightstand for support. I felt my body slump to the floor as my eyes began to close. I heard footsteps getting closer and closer as everything around me went black. Come on, Maya, we have to go soon. The sunlight felt warm on my skin as I opened my eyes to find myself covered in soft blankets. The sun shone through the open window that was letting the cool air into the room. As I sat up, I saw him, Alex, rushing around in a button-down shirt and an untied tie around his neck. I had never seen him dressed up before, as we never had anywhere fancy to go, so I couldn't help but stare. You're here, I whispered mainly to myself because I couldn't believe it. What? Are you okay? You seem stunned, Alex said. He sat down on the edge of the bed and took my hand. They felt so real that I almost started to cry. The same scar he had on his thumb from when he cut himself with a knife shopping carrots was the first thing I looked for, and there it was, right in front of me. I rubbed his palm because the last time I did they were cold due to his lack of blood, and right now they were so warm. Did you have a nightmare? His eyebrows laced together like they did when he was confused about something. No, I'm fine, was all I said. My heart started to sink because this wasn't a nightmare. It was worse. This wasn't real. It was all in my head. My real body was asleep and drugged up as my subconscious created this world filled with my wishes. Okay, well then get up because we really are going to be late. Alex jumped up and kissed my head. It was only for a second, but it meant the world to me at that moment. Where are we going? I asked as I got out of bed. Alex stood and looked at me for a second before turning around and opening the closet door. He didn't answer me. My conscience didn't create a place for us to go to. I was just seeing what I wanted to see. Alex dressed nicely, us living together in a house, and just being with him. So, of course, he had no idea where we were going, because I had no idea where we were going. Why don't we just stay here? I suggested. Okay? Alex's blank expression turned into a smile. I missed his smile. Alex sat on the bed and crossed his legs as he used to when he had an idea. He started to fiddle his hands together, which was a nervous habit he told me he picked up from his brother. I grabbed his hands to make him stop. I knew he was nervous because I felt nervous. The pill interchanged our emotions to be the same because Alex wasn't really here. Mom used to tell me about how she saw a beautiful angel when she would take the pill, and it would always feel the same that she did when she spoke to it. I held Alex's hands so he would stop fidgeting. "I have to tell you something," I said after a while. "I know what you're going to say," he smiled again. I really missed his damn smile. "You do?" His face fell back into the blank expression he had before, but this time he gripped my wrist. "I'm not here. This isn't real. I'm not actually in front of you, but it feels real, and you don't know if you're dreaming or awake. That's what the pill does to you, Maya. Your reality will become distorted. Everything will be a little off. Don't trust the girl. She doesn't want to help you despite what she says. Don't fall victim to the pill." My eyes widened. How did he know this? Was it really me, trying to warn myself? Was it Alex breaking through from the afterlife? No, that one was too outrageous. But is it? "What do you mean?" I asked, but he had reverted back to his smiling self and let go of my wrists. "What do you mean?" he laughed. "Sometimes you say the funniest things, Maya." I stood up and backed against the wall. What the hell was going on? I never meant to take the pill. I just wanted to see Alex again, and the girl had been so convincing. She said she was the daughter of the doctor who created the pill. She told me her name was Kira, and that her father created the pill to save her mother, but it ended up putting her in a comatose state. The pill didn't mean to go on the market, but someone found out it gave people crazy trips, and then the world went mad to live in their fantasies. Kira had said that the world was already ending, so why not go out like everyone else and see the one person who ever truly loved me? And I was a fool for listening to her. Alex stood up and looked at his watch. "It's almost time to go." When I looked at him this time, I saw Alex. I saw his soul in his eyes. He was here, with me, and he was trying to save me. I woke up a few seconds later and found myself gasping for air. My head spun when I tried to stand up. I found the ground moving underneath my feet. I couldn't tell if I was still dreaming. The girl was gone. But on my nightstand was a clear bottle of red pills with a note that read, "Take them. They might be the best damn thing to happen to you. Kira." A spring breeze in winter. Karina woke up and her sheets, damp with cold sweat, clung to her body. Her dreams still swam in her vision. The dizzying vertigo from the view off the bridge started to turn her stomach. She'd woken up right as she'd jumped, and yet she could still feel the wind on her face as she'd fallen. Her ragged breath echoed around the barren apartment. She couldn't still her heartbeat, and she looked around wildly for shoebox before remembering that she'd dropped her cat off at her new home yesterday before. Wait, before what? As Karina closed her eyes, her nightmare flashed back into her eyes. Why had she given shoebox up again? A fleeting memory of a little girl holding shoebox in her arms danced into her mind before fleeing just as expeditiously, until Karina wasn't even sure it was real. Surely she hadn't given up shoebox. Sure enough, a familiar meow sounded from just under the bed, and shoebox sprung up onto the bed, prickling Karina's bare legs with her prickly, tabby fur. "Hey, baby girl." "PRR up," shoebox informed her, mashing her head against Karina's lips. Her purr stabilized Karina's heartbeat, and Karina lay back on her bed, looking up at the old, stained ceiling of her apartment. Everything was all right. Karina absent-mindedly stroked shoebox's fur. She still felt the remains of her nightmare, but at least she knew she was safe now. Safe and sound. Wait, not safe. Karina sat up. It was a Thursday, and the angle of the sun streaming in onto the floor told her that she was already late for work. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and grabbed her phone, which told her that it was Saturday. That couldn't be right. Yesterday had been her last Wednesday at work. It was marked off on the calendar on her nightstand. Karina screwed her eyes shut in the sunlight, and the vision of the shallow river far below her burst back into her brain and left her panting again. Karina's nightmares usually didn't last this long into her day. Shoebox purred again, and it made things a little better. Shoebox always did. Karina made a conscious effort to firmly put the dream to the wayside and concentrate on reality. Today was a Saturday, her one free day. She stood and stretched before wriggling into a pair of jeans and a sweater. Shoebox mewed as Karina kissed her on the top of the head before she left. Bye-bye, baby girl. Karina crept down her hallway as silently as she could. But the third door on the right opened nonetheless, and her landlord, Mrs. Bulger, squinted up at Karina with her beady blue eyes. Hello? Ma'am, I'm really sorry I don't have the rent yet. I'm still trying to pull it together after Travis left. I'll be able to pay you soon. I'm sorry, Karina trailed off as Mrs. Bulger continued to stare. Then she gave a thin, dazed smile. Oh, don't worry about it. I know you've been in a rough place since that scumbag left. Tell you what, I'll give you an extension. Just this once. You can pay me when you're ready, okay? Without waiting for a response, she retreated back into her quarters and slammed the door. Karina stood in shock. Mrs. Bulger had never offered to hold off on rent collection before. In fact, she usually asked Karina for the rent a few days early, just to make her nervous. Karina shrugged it off. Her sister had always said, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Karina jammed her hands in her pockets as she walked outside, expecting it to be as cold and moist and gray as it was every day in the winter here. Instead, she was pleasantly surprised to find a clear blue sky and a warm spring breeze that brushed against her face. Wait, a spring breeze? That couldn't be right, Karina thought. There was nothing alive, nothing growing. For a second, Karina felt herself grow woozy, and her stomach turned as it had in her dream. Plummeting off the bridge, she shook it off. It was a nice day, a nice Saturday, and she should really take advantage of it. She stretched in the sunlight, letting it spread over her skin and flow into her veins. It was almost too warm to wear her sweater. Despite herself, Karina smiled. It had been a while since she saw the sun. Karina was already a few steps into the walk to the florist when she realized what she was doing. It had been a while since she'd come outside on a day she didn't have work. But now that she was out, Karina couldn't think of a reason she shouldn't revive her Saturday tradition from months ago, back before Travis had been and gone, back when Karina still went outside, back when she'd still felt joy. Karina couldn't fathom now why she'd stayed inside for so long. It was so much nicer here than in her cinderblock apartment. The sun caught in her crow-black hair as she walked along the quiet streets. Not many people were out today, which was refreshing. Karina had kind of assumed that the streets would be flooded, since it was a Saturday. She let her dream fall to the wayside. It was just a dream, after all, no matter how realistically the wind had whipped against her face as she fell. The cashier behind the counter grinned at Karina when she walked in. Welcome. It's good to see you. It's been a while. Yeah, sorry, I got busy. No need to apologize. The cashier's wide, toothy grin was comforting. I'm just happy you're here now. Karina's shoulders relaxed. Why had she been so worried about what the cashier thought? Thank you. I like your ring. The cashier beamed and twisted the black ring encircling their middle finger. Oh, thank you. You're so kind. That comment just made my day. Seemed a bit of an overreaction for a simple compliment, Karina thought, but it warmed her heart nonetheless. Yeah, no problem. Can I get a bouquet of purple pansies and baby's breath using our Saturday special coupon with a single blue salvia in the middle? The cashier laughed. Yeah, I remember. I've actually got one right in the back, ready for you. They disappeared into the back. That's convenient. Thank you. Karina furrowed her brow. That was a weird combination to have on hand, she thought, especially because she hadn't been there in over 2 months. For a second, cold air slashed against her skin, which was strange for the middle of a florist shop. She shook it off. Everything was fine. She was just being paranoid. Here you are, the cashier grinned. That'll be $14.95. Karina dug in her wallet to pull out a 5 and a 10. Huh, how perfect. You can keep the nickel. She collected the bouquet, tucking the small bundle into the crook in her arm. Have a nice day. Thanks, you too. The sun seemed even brighter when she stepped back out of the door. Karina took a deep breath, sniffing the salvia. Her sister had always said that the scent of salvia was her favorite, but it just smelled like weird, crappy mint to Karina. Oh well. She checked her phone. It was almost noon, so the cemetery would be open at this hour. It was only a short walk, but today it felt even shorter, as if a great weight had been lifted from Karina's chest. She took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel guilty. She was content, almost happy. The sky and her heart were light, and Karina breathed easy as she walked the peaceful streets. The reverie broke as soon as she put one foot on the great stone bridge that led to the graveyard. The air around her grew colder, nippier, and a great sense of dread invaded Karina as she walked to the top of the arch and looked down at the shallow water far below. Once there had been a river here, raging and frothy, even on the balmiest of summer days. But Karina knew that wasn't why the river brought her unease. It was her stupid dream again. And when Karina closed her eyes, she was there again, tumbling head over heels in the open air, rushing towards that shallow grave. This was no memory. This was real, and the peal of her scream couldn't have lasted more than a second. But to Karina, it was hours of cold, searing regret before a gritting, strained voice said, "No, we've still got time, not yet." Karina blinked her eyes back open in time to stop her small bouquet from slipping off of the railing. The churning of her stomach hadn't stopped yet, and the memory of how it had felt to stand on the stone railing and let her knees buckle remained ingrained in her legs. Karina backed away from the railing and hurried to the other side of the bridge where she sunk to the ground, her legs crumbling under the weight of living. Just for a second, Karina had lived some other life. A life that, although being so wrong, had felt right for her. These surroundings, her experiences were tainted now. Tainted with the version of herself that had taken that plunge, and Karina couldn't stop shaking. That voice she'd heard, who was that? Was she going crazy? The more Karina thought of it, the less she was even sure she'd actually heard a voice. Had she just had a flashback to her nightmare? Her sister had always told her she had an active imagination. Karina hunched over her bouquet of flowers, smelling the crappy mint. It grounded her, and the feeling of falling slowly faded into the background of her mind. She was here. She was safe. She was alive. Eventually, Karina stood back up. The farther back into her mind went, the cloudier her thoughts felt. The lightness in her chest that had delighted her earlier was now suspicious. Had she remembered to feed Shoebox this morning? Karina couldn't remember. Shoebox's bowl hadn't been next to the door where it usually was. She also didn't remember putting her phone in her pocket, but it was right where it always was. Why had she thought to walk to her sister's grave today when she hadn't been since June? A black crow nearly flew into her hair and Karina ducked, breaking her away from her mind for a second. The crow landed on a tree nearby and cawed at her, reprimanding her for getting so caught up in her own thoughts. Karina shook her head vigorously. She was being paranoid, she insisted. It was just paranoia. She was here to visit her sister because she was feeling better today. It was a nice Saturday, and she was doing something she had wanted to do for a while. Karina took a few stumbly steps forward, her legs growing steadier with every step. The gravestones were as solemn as always. The engravings and lives of the people whose corpses they marked eroded away with the years. Her sister's was one of the newest there, a lovely marble with white, gray, and green stones in a swirling pattern under the name Iudita Kazaku, and the dates 1996 to 2018. Karina had wanted to add, loving sister, loving friend, but she hadn't had the money to pay for it, and Travis would never have let her borrow any. He'd been mad enough as it was that she'd spent so much on the grave marker in the first place. Hey, Iudita. Karina smiled wanly. It's been a while. I'm sorry. Karina was about to tell Iudita about the dream she'd had when she noticed the large bouquet of poppies and asphodel lying across Iudita's grave, and she frowned. Nobody in the city remembered Iudita fondly but Karina, who missed her little sister every single day. Putting down her own small bouquet on Iudita's grave, Karina lifted the hefty bundle of flowers. It was far more cumbersome than her own. Feathering through the flowers, she finally dug out a buried card, reading Iudita Dragasora, Imi Per Rao, Disable. Karina nearly dropped the bouquet. Her baby brother had disowned Iudita years ago after the accident. There was no way this bouquet was really from him. She didn't even know how Disable would have been able to bring it here. Given that he lived in California now, something was wrong, she thought. Her estranged brother's forgiveness of her and Iudita was all she'd ever wanted. But this was wrong. It would never happen like this. This wasn't real, she realized. And as soon as she'd accepted that as fact and rejected the reality around her, her nightmare crashed back into her, and suddenly the world started swirling, cold air buffeting against Karina's face and body as she fell towards the swiftly approaching ground. So, you figured it out. I should have known the bouquet would be going too far. I just knew how much you needed his reconciliation. I'm sorry. Karina blinked her eyes open. She was suspended midair, between the stone bridge and the shallowed river, and although the air was far colder against her skin than it was a moment ago, Karina felt that it was right. Memories poured into her brain, the memory of giving shoebox to a new family, visiting Iudita's grave one last time, and finally walking to the great stone bridge and jumping to her death. That hadn't been a dream after all. Who are you? A figure appeared before her, nude apart from a garland of leaves that lay around her neck. Although her skin was stone gray and her hair a constantly blooming patch of pink flowers, Karina found she couldn't take her eyes off the large, translucent dragonfly wings that kept the figure afloat in the air next to her. My name is Ardath. Although her tone was far more relaxed and sad now, Karina recognized the resemblance to the voice she'd heard when she was falling earlier. Are you a? Karina fought for the words. Ardath smiled sadly. Don't concern yourself with that right now, Karina. What's going on? Ardath reached out and traced Karina's jawline. I wanted to give you one last day. What? I tried. I hope you know. I tried to keep you safe, to keep you happy. I just couldn't do enough, and you turned to this. Ardath closed her eyes tightly. Karina looked down at the ground below her. I'm sorry. Are you a fairy godmother? More like a guardian angel. Ardath reopened her eyes. They'd gone a particularly brilliant violet hue. I just wanted you to be okay, but I failed. No, Karina rushed to console her. No, you didn't fail. It's my fault, not yours. It's okay. Don't you fret. It's too late now. Anyway, what's done has been done. What happened to me? I wanted to give you one last day. Ardath bit her lip. When you jumped, I sent you a dream. I wanted it to be the best day you've had, but every time your life became good, you got more suspicious, and my power over your consciousness slipped. I'm sorry, Karina. I just wanted to give you one last good day, she repeated. Karina looked to the ground, hardly 10 feet below her. And there's nothing you can do now? Seeing the shallow waters so still and so smooth was strange. Nary a ripple disturbed the surface of the trickling stream, as if it was frozen in ice rather than time. No, I'm sorry. Oh. Karina looked left, towards her sister's grave. Will it hurt? I will do what I can, Ardath promised. She cupped Karina's face with her other hand. I am so sorry. Karina looked down again at her final choice. Thank you for trying. All I could ever do for you was try. Mrs. Goodwin's house. She lived at the top of Toucan Hill in a mini mansion. The front entrance was designed with bushes in intricate swirls and a small fountain made of fish spouting curls of water. Quinn walked up the porch and rang the bell. Mrs. Goodwin answered in a long black silk robe which reached the floor. She hugged Quinn, purring Quinn's name into her neck. Sewell, good to see you. The house was freezing. Mrs. Goodwin walked ahead of Quinn, her robe traipsing the floor. Floating behind her, they passed the curved staircase adorned in a long red carpet, and the portrait of Blair and her dead sister, Margaret. It hung above the fireplace and took up most of the wall. Blair and Margaret were dressed in twin ivory dresses, their eyes vacant. A small hummingbird added to Margaret's right shoulder, a squirrel at Blair's feet. Mrs. Goodwin and Quinn sat at the kitchen table, Mrs. Goodwin's nipples poking the thin silk like 2 chocolate chips. Quinn tried to avert her eyes. Well, Mrs. Goodwin said, are you hungry? Thirsty? Can I get you anything? Quinn shook her head slowly. She found she couldn't speak. Her movements were laborious and heavy as though she were moving through molasses. I wish Blair would come home, Mrs. Goodwin said. She has such a beautiful room here just waiting for her. You remember it, don't you? The 4-poster queen bed, the white canopy with feathers, the Santorini blue walls. I remember, Quinn finally managed. A plate of cookies suddenly materialized before her. She nibbled on one of their scalloped edges. Blair tells me you're going to be a writer, one of books. It's all just so exciting, isn't it? Will you write about me? No, I'm just kidding. Blair is so much more exciting anyway, don't you think? Let's go in the backyard by the pool. It's so nice out today. Quinn followed her to the backyard where a large, rectangular pool was set deep in the fake grass. 4 lounge chairs sat in front of the pool. Mrs. Goodwin made them martinis at the bar cart to the side of the pool. Have you had lunch yet? No. It was 11 a.m. Ah, well, cheers, she said, clinking her glass with Quinn's. Quinn noticed it was plastic. Mrs. Goodwin crawled onto one of the chairs beside Quinn and closed her eyes. She raised the glass to her lips and drank the whole thing. Quinn tossed hers back too, grimacing at the basically plain vodka. She popped open a jar of green olives from the bottom of the cart and dipped her fingers into it, eating some. I never knew you used the backyard, Quinn said. In fact, I've never seen anyone swim in the pool, ever. Mrs. Goodwin refilled their glasses with straight vodka, not bothering to give the illusion of stirring or shaking anything. She took off her robe and gave Quinn a daring glance before cannonballing into the pool with the glass still in her hand. Quinn imagined the pool water mixing with the vodka. She watched as Mrs. Goodwin stretched a toe underwater and raised it up, snatching a green olive that had fallen out of her glass and popped it into her mouth. Her stomach was Polate's taut. A little mushroom cap of a belly button protruded from her skin. Maria, the housekeeper, shot out of the house and came running across the lawn. She grabbed the bottle of vodka and refilled Mrs. Goodwin's glass. She waved hello to Quinn, then ran back inside, closing the sliding glass door behind her. Quinn took off her shorts and top and dove in beside Mrs. Goodwin, who was splashing the water and laughing. The light blue ocean glimmered in the distance. They sat crisscrossed and sunk underwater, pantomiming a tea party. Quinn thought about calling Blair on her drive home, telling her about how she just had an underwater tea party with her mother. "I hope you don't judge me," Mrs. Goodwin said to Quinn, pouting. Quinn looked up at the house. It was a dark lemon color. The bushes around them were manicured and shaped to look like flowers and dolphins. She thought of the few nights in high school she'd spent there after Margaret had died. Mrs. Goodwin always passed out on the couch downstairs. Once, she trotted into the living room when Blair and Quinn had just arrived home. She had taken Ambien and was asking Quinn to lie about Blair's dead guinea pig, who hadn't been alive for several years by that time. Blair stood staring at her, her arms crossed. Her gray eyes squinted at her mother, disgusted. Mrs. Goodwin had screamed, wailing, "Lola is dead. She's really dead. I can't lie to you anymore, Blair, baby." Blair had pushed her mother back so that she fell against the foot of the stairs. Then she walked up to her room with the Santorini blue walls, leaving Quinn downstairs. "Are you all right, Mrs. Goodwin?" She wagged her head back and forth, clutching onto Quinn's wrists, digging her fingernails into her skin, causing small crescent moon indentations. "It was all my fault. Take me instead. It should be me instead." She had curled up on the stairs and fallen asleep. "No, I don't judge you," Quinn said. "I don't know what it's like. I don't know what any of it is like. I don't sleep. I can't, do you?" "Not much," Quinn said. Mrs. Goodwin stared out at the ocean in the distance, spitting pool water onto the lawn. Quinn leaned her head back, dipping the crown of her head into the water and letting it spread against her scalp like fingers gently playing piano keys. She sunk lower and lower beneath the water as she watched Mrs. Goodwin climb out of the pool and pad back toward the house. When Quinn woke, she was trapped underwater. The car door wouldn't budge. She couldn't push it open. She was already so sleepy. She closed her eyes again and felt herself drifting. The rectangular pool she had been in bled into the ground. She was between the pool and the dirt now until suddenly she was propelled to the other side of the dirt, atop it. She was sitting in her friend's backyard petting the tabby cat. They were eating bowls of pasta salad and drinking from a carafe of ruby wine. Her friend's lips were stained purple. Margaret was there, pretty Margaret, until she turned around to look at Quinn, and Quinn saw that half of her face was devoid of flesh, the bone and gristle sticking out like sharp pieces of coral. She pointed to Margaret's face, but her scream was silent, blocked. She sounded burbled. Her friends stared at her with blank faces, spooning the spirals of pasta into their purpled mouths. She tried to tell them something was wrong with Margaret. Something was wrong with her face, but they all began to melt. There was an extraordinary pressure in her head, like an iron rod trying to expand between her temples. Their faces and their clothes began to ooze and slide. A brick of cheese held to an open flame. The colors made her dizzy. She moved slowly from the grass to the table and tried to hold their faces and their clothes up, but they ran too fast. Mrs. Goodwin walked through the trees, glowing and naked, raising the triangle glass martini to her lips and tipping it back. Quinn sat back on the grass, defeated, her friends in puddles beneath the table. She plucked waxy leaves from the trees and ripped them apart, letting them scatter on top of the cat's fur. He turned to look at her with eyes the color of a green Sprite glass bottle. "Quinn?" he said. "Quinn?" she coughed, sputtering, and sat up. She gathered dust in her hands, letting it spool out like threads in the dry air. It was hot, and the sand swirled around her, forming an hourglass made of sand, dispelling sand. She walked through it, letting herself be absorbed by it. Her body was swept up by it and scattered back out again. She was Lot's wife turned to salt. She was the physical manifestation of time. She was the iris of the cat's eyes, green and translucent, sea glass washed out to shore and sucked back in again. On land, her lips were the color of clear crystals, whitewashed blue. They closed her eyes and zipped her up and carried her off. Lost in my head, an automated voice tells me to step into the chamber. I enter, ducking a little to avoid hitting my head on the low frame. Please stand still during this step. Any unexpected movements will complicate the mind mapping process. I position myself so that I can remain motionless for the next 5 minutes. I am the last one remaining in my group to go through the machine, so they will all be waiting for me to finish. I close my eyes as the buzzing noise closes in around me. What I and those ahead of me are doing today is vital for our survival if we want to continue living. We are changing our state of consciousness in order to become human. It was a huge decision made over years of debate, but in the end, it was found to be the only solution for our species that grows smaller every day. Our planet is unfit to live on, and since we are the most similar to humans, the only place for us to go is to Earth, and which means we have to become as like them as possible. I am in one of many prep pods that will scan my mind and map my intelligence level, deepest fears, highest hopes, and determine how and which memories are necessary to delete before I can fit in among the human population. When I leave my pod, I will be led down a hallway into a room where, with the information gathered from the mind mapping, another machine will provide a personalized set of trials I will have to endure before I can proceed to Earth. In my landscape, the line between being awake and dreaming is blurred, and I will not be able to tell what is real and what is not. Finally, I walk out and into the hallway. I take my time getting there because I know that once I reach the door at the end, I will not be the same person who am I now. Still, this is the option if I want to wake up tomorrow. The room is dim, but somewhere light bleeds in, allowing my eyes to take in the vast emptiness. I'm barely through the door when it slides closed with a bang behind me. The simulation begins. My body is yanked forward by an invisible force, jolting me to my very core, and I fall to my knees, gasping for air. I look around desperately in the pitch black, trying to see something, anything, but it's pointless. I am left with only 4 senses. I grope at the dusty floor and my eyes fly open. I'm surprised to discover that I am not on the ground. I am still on my feet, and the room is no longer black. It's a pure, blinding white. I turn around when I feel cold water drip down my back, but I am too late, and I am thrown across the room by a sudden current of water gushing from the ceiling. I have never learned how to swim. Water is foreign to my kind as we do not need it. So I panic, swallowing mouthfuls as I twist and somersault in the rising flood. A hand reaches down and pulls me out, but I can't focus on their face. I can only see the hand which is still holding on to mine. I look at it and scream when I see that it's morphed into an angry snake coiling tight around my arm. I drop it and run for the door, but the door is only getting farther away from me the faster I go. The snake hisses and slithers towards me, and I can no longer move. I'm paralyzed. I scream again, but nothing comes out. The snake disappears as quickly as it had come, leaving a beach and sun in its place. This one is nice, but I can tell it's not real because I want it to stay this way and not go back to what I had previously been subjected to. But if it's fake, why can I feel a breeze brush back my hair and wiggle my toes in the grass? I lay there for hours, just enjoying the warmth on my skin. It's not so bad here. I think I wouldn't mind staying. I begin to relax and fall into a false sense of security. Pushing away my feelings of foreboding, I spread myself out and reach as far as I can to soak in the sun. Suddenly, I am standing on the other side of a glass wall watching as the rest of my group walks away, leaving me behind. We have to go now. She is taking too long. Her life is not worth risking the existence of the rest of us. We cannot stay any longer. There's nothing I can do as they walk away from me but pound on the glass trying to get their attention. If they just turn around, they would see that I'm right here. I'm ready to leave with them. I fall yet again to my knees, this time because of the grief that has passed over me. I was the only one who was unable to pass this mind test, and now it's too late. I'm going to be stuck here forever. And then everything goes completely black, and I find myself groping at a dirty floor, searching for something to hold on to that could help me get my bearings. I get up and stumble around in the direction I think is the exit. What I thought had taken hours, even days, had happened in only a second, an illusion created by my mind. My hand falls onto a door handle, and I turn it. But what's on the other side is not what I expected at all. Instead of finding the rest of my group, the doorstep drops off abruptly into space. The lonely stars tug at me to let go and fall into its abyss. For several seconds, I consider giving in to the urge and nearly lose my grasp on solid ground when I come to my right mind and slam the door shut. I stand there motionless until the door is cracked open again. I see someone enter, their identity hidden by the light following them inside. They call my name, and my mind goes blank. Wishbone. A long triangular shadow had formed between the wall and the mirror. The closer I got, the darker it became. By the time it was in arm's reach, the shaft had lost any discernible tone, and the wall behind completely vanished. I reached out and picked it up. The shadow was surprisingly warm and soft to the touch. It reminded me of the old wishbones we used to leave out on the kitchen windowsill to dry. It had that porous malleability of bone. It was strong, but could be broken with enough intent. Nothing replaced the shadow. The area behind the mirror was as white as the rest of the wall, and I retrieved the silhouette from the opposite side with the same ease. I stood a little confused. Two large beams of shadow in hand. Their weight and substance began to stir me. The novelty of having taken something from nothing was short-lived. The room was cold and firewood expensive. It might make good fuel for the fire. It felt dry enough to burn, or at the very least could be dried, so I looked about for more. The room was alive with them. They waved out jagged limbs from behind the bookcase. They crystallized into little rocks of coal gathered behind the handles on the dresser. Tough, lumpy mounds had set about the piles of discarded clothes, and a ripple of solid black shadow snaked its way up behind the curtains. Almost every piece of furniture in the room cast an abundance of would-be firewood. Each side of the bed, a bow cast down from the sink, even the bottom of the bin. By the time I had added all the sizable gloomy slabs from under the desk, and behind the door I had almost a month's firewood. The glut of fuel continued to grow as I realized that although any shadow I took was replaced by a white wall or the soft wicker of the bin, if I left the spot and came back to look at it again from another angle or vantage point, a new shadow had formed. With a little ingenuity and closing of eyes, I heaved off great chunks 10 times over from the same spot. My pile of shadows covered nearly half the room. A chance mistake gave me the idea of creating a second mound, this time of kindling. The turning of the bedroom door handle allowed for me to flick a kind of shaving straight off at a remarkable pace. After 10 minutes of harvesting, the first shadow pile was itself casting a shadow which I quickly pulled out and added to the load. The stockpile was nearly at the ceiling before I began to think more pragmatically. I would have enough firewood for the next 2 to 3 winters at this rate, but with nowhere to store it all, it would cramp up the garden and living space. What needed to be done was to turn this into a trade. I could build a covering near the gate to keep it dry and sell to the local families or passers-by at a smidgen of the price in the village, or obtain a cart and haul it around in great big bundles to the local businesses. I would need a horse, but one could be borrowed at first until I had made enough to buy one outright. I might be able to get credit for the cart too. If I began locally and used the money made from small sales to my neighbors to demonstrate to one of the local farmers my reliability, there would surely be no issue with their loaning me the horse and cart. Halfway through lugging the pile to the garden, I began to notice the light in the corridor had dimmed. Above me, the bulb waned and flickered. The pearl of light sagged in its globe under some great pressure. Its energy sucked downward, leaving a peculiar dusk about my feet. I'd successfully taken 6 full wheelbarrows down in the fervor of my future prosperity without noticing the onset of gloom. The whole hallway was murky and obscured as if looked at through squinted eyes. Some of the kindling flakes I'd happily shaved off moments before had dropped and seemed to be sticking to the floor. Ringlets of shadow had fallen and smudged a crude arabesque stain on the wooden boards, running all the way back to my room. Before long, great black stains were emerging all over the floor, blotches of morbid rain bleeding together and undoubtedly sucking in the light from above. I fumbled my way into the bedroom and made for the light, but it did nothing. Only the faintest globule of amber could be made out in the bulb. An impenetrable gloom carpeted everything, wilting the contours of the table, bed, and window into shade. I crashed into the remaining stock of shadow and tumbled to the floor. Indescribable darkness irradiated, consuming everything, and the last droplet of amber above me vanished. I pushed the planks of broken shadow to one side and made for the curtain, for daybreak. As I tore them apart, I found myself able, for the briefest of seconds, in the light of the early morning, to appreciate the full depth of the blackness. My hands were vanished, painted into oblivion from picking at the scraps of shadow and dragging the great lumps of fuel out to the garden. Having slipped on my way to the window, large parts of my legs and side were scrawled out. Looking in the mirror, I could only see but small scraps of skin left unblotted by the shadow. As I made to feel what was left of my face, the ink began to run, and I was consumed into the nothingness. Absorbed into the indefinable, I sat on the end of my bed, waving my hands through the dead air. The light from the window was choked, the morning blindfolded and mute.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling content.